It all began on a bitterly cold morning in Blackwood, a small, isolated town nestled deep in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. The town was known for its eerie quietness and the dense fog that clung to the trees like a shroud. I lived in a modest apartment on the second floor of Willow Creek Apartments, a crumbling building on the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it was home until they moved in. I was jolted awake by the sound of a truck rumbling outside. Groggy and annoyed, I checked the time. 7:30 a.m. The sun had barely risen and the frost on my window glistened in the pale light. A van packed with furniture and boxes had pulled up to the building, followed by an ancient, rusted sedan. A family climbed out, their movement slow and deliberate, like predators sizing up their territory. There was a man in his 40s, burly but hunched, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. His wife, a gaunt woman with hollow eyes and a permanent scowl, barked orders at their two children, a boy and a girl, both wrapped in oversized coats that swallowed their small frames. An elderly man, presumably the grandfather, shuffled behind them, his face obscured by a thick scarf. I watched from my window as they unloaded their belongings, their voices carrying through the thin walls of the building. They didn't seem to care that it was early morning or that the rest of us were trying to sleep. The sound of furniture scraping against the pavement and the occasional crash as something heavy hit the ground made it impossible to rest. By the time I ventured out later that morning, the family had already made themselves at home. I ran into the mother, Martha, in the hallway. She introduced herself with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We're your new neighbors," she said, her voice raspy and low. "Apartment 48. I forced a polite smile and muttered something about being late for work. As I walked past her, I noticed the children peeking out from behind her legs. Their faces were pale, their eyes wan and unblinking. They didn't say a word, but their stares sent a chill down my spine. Over the next few days, the family's presence became impossible to ignore. The children ran up and down the stairs at all hours, their laughter echoing through the building. The parents argued loudly, their voices carrying through the thin walls. And then there were the smells, pungent and metallic, like raw meat left out in the sun. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard scratching at my door. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then I realized someone was trying to pick the lock. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and flung the door open, but no one was there. All I heard were footsteps retreating up the stairs. I followed the sound and saw the door to their apartment closing. I knocked and Martha answered, acting as if nothing had happened. When I confronted her about the lock picking, she brushed it off, saying, "Kids will be kids." But something about her tone made my skin crawl. The next morning, I woke up to find a bloody handprint on my door. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the family had disappeared. The officers searched their apartment and found nothing out of the ordinary, except for a strange smell that lingered in the air. A few days later, I returned home from a business trip to find the building eerily quiet. As I climbed the stairs, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. When I reached my floor, I noticed scratches around the keyholes of my neighbors' doors. I called the police again, but before they arrived, the family returned. This time, they weren't pretending to be normal. Martha cornered me in the hallway, her eyes wild and her breath reeking of decay. She told me they had been waiting for me. Before I could react, her husband, Frank, and the grandfather grabbed me and dragged me into their apartment. What I saw next haunts me to this day. The living room was a nightmare. A blood-stained stump sat in the corner, surrounded by dismembered bodies. The family had been cannibalizing their victims, and I was next. They tied me to a chair and began their gruesome ritual. Martha cut a piece of flesh from my chest and ate it in front of me, while the children laughed and played with the remains of their previous victims. I thought I was going to die there, but I managed to free myself when Frank left the room. I grabbed a knife and fought back, killing the entire family in a desperate bid for survival. When the police arrived, they found me covered in blood, surrounded by the carnage. The investigation revealed that the family had been responsible for over 100 murders. They had been on the run for years, moving from place to place and preying on unsuspecting victims. The detective who handled my case told me I'd done the right thing. Sometimes, he said, you have to take matters into your own hands. I spent weeks in the hospital recovering from my injuries. The physical wounds healed, but the psychological scars remain. I still hear their laughter in my dreams and see their faces whenever I close my eyes. I moved out of that building as soon as I could, but I know I'll never truly escape what happened there.